Super Week is upon us in the VCT Americas regular season stage 1, and it's time to do a power rankings before that gets started. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we are ranking all 11 teams in the VCT Americas League. This is based off of which teams are playing the best right now. So it's not exactly where I see each of these teams on paper by the end of the year, but it is how I see them playing at this moment. We are only 2 weeks into stage 1, so some teams have only played one match, but Super Week is upon us, so it's probably best to do it now before after Super Week, where we probably know what teams are going to be in playoffs and which teams aren't. So this is the power rankings board that we have. The last time I did this was about a month ago after kickoff happened, so I will be mentioning what change we have for each team from the last time I did this. We will be going from bottom to top, starting with the team that has no change from last time I did this, and that is Furia. They are still at number 11. Furia just clearly looked like the worst team in Americas right now. There doesn't seem to be a lot of comeback potential in their play. The one silver lining right now is that Nosword definitely has added something to this team. He is playing well, but this team is still just not great. So it's probably going to be a long season for Furia. I don't expect this roster to stay together past this year, but maybe there's some potential that they end up doing something to, turn the season around, but it just seems unlikely at this point. Next up at number 10, down 4 spots from last time. They're at number 6, but they are now at number 10, and that is Evil Geniuses. With the roster they have, this is the spot that I would have expected Evil Geniuses to be in pretty much all year. At kickoff, they did surprise some people. I was kind of thinking like maybe they'll just come out and have some surprise victory against whoever they play. And that did end up happening against G2. They did get the better of them. They did win a map against Loud, but they weren't able to make it to Madrid. And it just seems like that surprise performance might be the best that we're going to get out of this team because they just haven't looked very good during the stage. They've played 2 matches, they've lost both of them, and most of their players are just struggling right now. There are some players with good clutch potential like Derek and Nature, but Joggermo's struggling, Aethpoth is doing okay. It's just this roster. I know Potter was talking about, her trying to build a roster to win with the resources that she had, but unfortunately, I just don't see it. Moving on to number 9, a team that is also down 4 spots from last time we did this, MIBR at number 9. So after kickoff, I did have MIBR at number 5. A lot of people saying that I was wrong to do that, but my argument then is that they actually had a pretty good kickoff. They were able to upset G2, they were able to upset Cloud9, they won against Furia. They didn't look like a team that was in the basement of the Americas. So far, they have only played 1 match, so that does kind of affect them being as low as they are because other teams have passed them. That may be one of if MIBR have, played another match and potentially won. We've seen them bounce back from a loss before, so I do think that they can do that. But right now, I just can't justify having them higher than the other teams that are going to be above them. So I do still believe in this roster, but we'll see where it ends up going. Moving on to number 8, we have a team that did move up after their first match of the season because they did win it, but then they lost their second one, so they stay in the same spot that they were a month ago. G2 is at number 8. So G2, it's been up and down so far this year. At kickoff, they had a pretty frustrating run. And now so far during stage 1, it's been a similar story. They did get that revenge match on Evil Geniuses, but then they lose to 100 Thieves in a pretty important game for them. So I don't know if the addition of Icy is going to bring what this roster wants. I know they brought in a duelist player so that they could move Leaf onto Sentinel because they do believe in him on that role. And granted, Leaf has looked good on that role. I just don't know if that's really where he truly shines. And so far, Icy just hasn't had a good match so far out of the 2. He has been struggling. There is time for him to get more accustomed to it, but it is just hard to make those adjustments on the fly when all the other teams are trying to get better as well. So I do question some of the decisions that G2 have made thus far, but I do still believe in this roster. I do still think that, if Icy can, really mesh with this roster, if everybody can start really firing on all cylinders, that they could see themselves in the top 10. But for now, I think they stay in number 8. We'll see where they end up going. There are just teams that are just playing better than them. So I don't think they stay in 8th place team. They absolutely could jump up, but there are other teams that I just think deserve to be in those higher spots over them, unfortunately. Which brings us to number 7, up 2 spots is Crew Esports. So what we've seen from Crew so far is while they haven't played super good opponents, they played Furia and MIBR. Up next is Evil Geniuses, absolutely winnable game, so they could find themselves with 3 wins pretty early on in the season, which can give them pretty good chances for playoffs. So even though the caliber of opponent that they face so far during the stage isn't exactly top tier, I do think that what we've seen from them so far is that Crew is finally out of the basement in the Americas. They were in the basement pretty much all year in 2023, aside from that LCQ run, and they're finally starting to look pretty good in their own region. So we'll see how they do against top teams in the region. The games they have coming up are definitely some tough ones, but it absolutely is doable for this team to make playoffs. So I didn't move them up a ton because of their victories, but they're definitely looking better. Moving on to number 6, we have a team moving up one spot from they were last month, and that is 100 Thieves. So 100 Thieves, I don't feel comfortable putting them in the top 5 because they did lose that game against Sentinels, which was probably their best chance to beat them, and they were able to beat G2, who I do see as below them. So if they had lost that, G2 probably would have been at number 6, potentially even number 5, and they would have been in number 8 or number 7 most likely. But 100 Thieves were able to win. I don't see that putting them in the top 5, even though they might be playing better than some teams that are in the top 5 potentially over a longer period of time. So we finally saw 100 Thieves play a team that wasn't considered to be top 5, top 4, top 3 in the Americas, and they were able to get the victory. So maybe those early matches in the season against teams much better than them was a good learning experience for them, and they can carry that momentum and that learning into the rest of the season. So there's definitely some reasons to be happy if you're a 100 Thieves fan. They look much better than they did in 2023. Cryo's playing well. Asuna's struggling, which is unfortunate, but I think Boostio is definitely fitting in, and EU is looking quite well. He might end up being one of their better pickups. Moving on to the top 5, starting off a team that I don't know if they really fully deserve to be in the top 5, but I can't justify dropping them super far just yet. Leviathan is at number 5. So if we were just going off of their game losing against Cloud9, this team potentially could see themselves as low as 8th. But they did recover, and they did win against Sentinels, an extremely sloppy win. Sentinels weren't at 100%, and Aspas definitely had to carry a lot of the team, but it's still an improvement. So they do move down 1 from where I had them last month. I had them at number 4. So I do think 5th place is a reasonable place to put them, but I don't know if we really see this team really command a top 3 spot at any point, and they absolutely could still have a huge collapse. They are against Energy next. That's going to be a really tough match, and it's a very important match for both teams in terms of standings. They are up against Energy next. That's a very important game for both teams, especially considering how the standings are shaking up right now. So Leviathan, that's a must-win game for them. I don't know if they get it done. Energy are a very good team, but as I always say, crazier things have happened. This team could have an upset victory and actually prove themselves to be a top team in the Americas. It's just going to be tough from here. So I feel like 5th, fair spot to have them. They're right at the top end of the mid-range, so we'll see. Moving on to a team that I'm genuinely shocked at the fact that I haven't put them on a ranking so far. Cloud9 is at number 4. C9 is playing some really good Valorant right now. I don't see their roster construction as something that should be doing as well as they have done so far. Not to say that I think their players are bad or anything. I just see their roster as one that is okay, but not on the top end of the Americas. Oxy's still young. He could potentially struggle. Vanity, historically, his teams haven't gone very far, unfortunately for him. Moose could be a good pickup. Rooney coming back. Is he going to be in form? Zeppa is Zeppa. But so far, even though it's just been 2 games, it's worked out really well. This team is playing really well so far. They haven't been starting matches on time, and I think that's one definitely concerning thing that you can look at when you look at Cloud9. They've lost both their first maps of both their matches so far, but what they've been able to show is that they can be resilient, they can adapt, and they can get and start playing up to a level that they can just grind out matches and beat teams at their own game. If Cloud9 is able to just drag teams into this chaotic mess that they seem to thrive in, then they can beat anybody. Case in point, in that Leviathan upset, that overtime was just insane, but due to some really clutch plays by Oxy and Rooney, this team was able to do it, and they were able to beat Evil Geniuses as well. So when it comes to Cloud9, I think once they face some better opponents, I don't know if I see them staying in top 4, but we've seen this team go on a run during those regular season stages. We saw it last year. They unfortunately didn't make it to any international, but they were able to be quite dangerous in their own region. So the same thing could happen again. So I'm not downing Cloud9 too much right now. I think they're playing really well, so I'm giving them the credit. they're in the top 4. Moving on to number 3, I can't move them down or up too much, so I'm putting Loud at number 3. They were at number 2 last time I did this. So they've only had that one game against Energy. They weren't able to win it. They were jet lagged. They had the visa issue situation where they were stuck in Ireland. So you don't really take a lot away from them because of that loss. I still think Loud are a top 3 team in the Americas. They do have some kinks to iron out, and I think they really need to decide on what their character comps are going to look like for the rest of the season. Do you continue to run that Phoenix Breach comp, even though there are some known weaknesses that teams are starting to figure out? Or do you start going to more traditional team comps? There are some questions swirling this team, but I think we'll have a good grasp on them after Super Week. I still see this team as a top 3 team. Do not doubt this team going to Shanghai. I'd be shocked if Loud miss any international this year, despite not looking as dangerous as they have in previous years. All right, so now we have the top 2 spots. We have Energy and Sentinels left. So who's number 1? Who's number 2? I am going to put Sentinels. And I'm going to talk about Sentinels before I talk about why Energy is number 1. Sentinels have played a lot of Valorant this year, more than any other team. They won Madrid, they had a very hard path to it. They won Kickoff, they had a very hard path to it. This team's played a lot of Valorant, and they had that John QT visa situation. It did end up getting solved before the first game of the season, so that was definitely good for them to get him back. And you get the win over 100 Thieves despite not having practice time, so still very impressive work. It was a result that I expected. But then you have that Leviathan game where you definitely could have won that multiple different times. You lose on Lotus, one of, if not your best map. I think that was their first loss on that map this year, so definitely something to hope to fix later in the season. But for Sentinels, I just get concerned about maybe the wins getting taken out of them a little bit. You know, again, they played just so much Valorant, they might be getting tired. But I do think this team bounces back from a loss. They've shown the ability to do that quite well this season. So if there are any Sen doubters, I don't think you should be doubting this team too much. They're still very dangerous. Just right now, they're not playing like a team that is the best in the region. Which brings me to Energy, a team that I think absolutely is playing the best Valorant in the Americas right now. And to anybody already pointing out that yes, they've only beaten teams that are seen as worse than them, at least in the case of Furia, and then with Loud having the jet lag situation, all true and fair points that I am taking into account. But I think this team is just playing on a different level than anybody else so far. They were able to not only beat Furia, but stop them during that first map. And yeah, the second map was closer, but it still was a pretty good stomping. And they were able to stomp on Loud as well during one of those maps. So I definitely don't think that you should take much away from the unfortunate situation of Loud or Furia being bad, away from the fact that Energy is an extremely good team. They're in a fantastic place to make playoffs and potentially be the top seed, which would mean they just need to win 1 to make it to Shanghai. Do not underrate this team. They're extremely dangerous, and they're starting to really find their form. Chet has this team playing some very good Valorant now, and I think they're the best in the Americas right now. Again, this is a dated thing. I don't know if Energy ends up being number 1 throughout the entire season, but right now, I think that's where they're at. So these are my power rankings for the VCT Americas League. Before Super Week starts, let me know in the comments where you guys have each and every team. Please click like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!